Hi everyone, just give me one more second as I market this out. I want to thank everyone for joining today. I'm going to be doing one on shading. I've been getting a lot of requests on how to shade properly without leaving brush strokes behind, or it becomes too fuzzy looking. And that's often because you're using too soft brushes, where sometimes you have to use a hard brush as well. And with me, I have Deandra, and we will have the comments on the side up at all times. So if you have any questions pertaining to the subject matter I'm drawing right now, or some questions you have just in digital art in general, or maybe a concept piece that you're wondering about, just write your question, and we will make sure to get back to you.
I believe somebody asked last time if you could access the questions after the stream is over, but I don't think that's the case.
I don't think I can. Yeah, sorry. Okay, I'm all set. You ready, D?
Yep.
Hi. Hi, everyone. I'm Tim Von Rieden with Deandra Pop with ConceptCookie.com. And in this live stream, I'm going to be going over shading. And we do these live streams every Wednesday at 2 p.m., and that's in the States, and that's Central Time, and it's -5 GMT if you're outside of the country. So I want to thank you all for coming. And today, let me go ahead and switch this over. Here, let me close the door really quick. Hold on. And before I start the stream, I just want to say that I just finished doing a tutorial and it was all about finding inspiration. And I think it's important that you guys find inspiration outside of just our entertainment media. So not just games or video games or movies, but oftentimes things that aren't so conventional. So like I just got this big Norman Rockwell magazine cover book, and he's been an artist that's influenced me for the longest time. And I also got an Alexander McQueen fashion book. And I think it's important that you guys integrate things that aren't just directly related to what concept art is normally directed at. All right, so with that, I'm going to go ahead and switch this to my screen. So if you guys know who this is Ziggs from League of Legends. I'm going to a convention this weekend, so I thought I might as well show you guys how I would go about shading this guy. And he has a lot of different elements to him, such as the fur, the goggles, metal on his helmet, his teeth, and his nose, and they all kind of have different surface textures to it. So that's why I wanted to show you guys this one and kind of just give a little glimpse as to how I go about doing my buttons. Okay. So the first thing that I'm going to do, here, what was that?
Sorry. We have our first question. How would you go about shading like a rock or rocks or like a cliff?
One, I would definitely get reference and make sure you have a textured look to it. So I would use either like a textured brush, such as a chalk brush, or even specifically a hard surface rock brush. Something where you're getting something that's not so soft or something that's not very fluid. It has a bit of texture to it. Again, I'm going to be color picking from the official League art. Okay, so I have my sketch on a single layer. So I'm going to make a new layer underneath of this. And I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to do most of this with, let's see, I'm going to use my circle hard edge brush. Okay, I'm going to make this head a little smaller. Alright, so the first thing that I'm going to do is, like I said, I made a new layer. I'm just going to mask out the circle that I laid out underneath of the sketch. And I'm just going to use a base color that I'm going to color right on top of. So I'm going to use kind of this dark purple maroon color. And that's because I like to use a color that I can kind of paint on top of, but that color will bring all of the colors that I paint on top of it together. Now, mind you, I'm still going to differentiate a little bit. So even with like the goggles, I'll probably have a slightly darker base. But for the most part, I'm going to pick from this general range of color that we're pre-selecting here.
Stephanie asks, how did you start this drawing? Did you sketch it out on paper first, or did you start directly in Photoshop?
This one I did directly into Photoshop. But if I was doing something that was more detailed, I would probably start it on paper and then just bring it into Photoshop. I think it's good for artists to see that you don't have to like choose one or the other. Like you can still do traditional stuff and bring it into digital, but just know that that definitely comes with a time. You have to be time conscious. So if this is something that you're doing for a project or for a client, you can't be spending too much time doing traditional stuff if they want a digital format to be the end result. Because oftentimes you might get sucked into doing something that might take longer because you're starting traditionally. Now, let's not say that's true for every artist. Some artists are faster doing it, starting traditional and then bringing it into Photoshop. But generally, I would say digital art is the faster medium. All right. So this tutorial is going to be talking about shading, like I said. So why don't we go ahead and kind of pick specific spots, and then I'll color it and show you guys how I would do it. So I'm going to go ahead and start kind of top to bottom. So let's start with the helmet here. So the helmet is kind of like a red base, and it has a slightly reflective surface to it. So I'm going to go ahead and lay down this darker red color. And I know it's probably a little hard to see right now, but as I go forward and kind of shade it out, you'll see it start to come alive. And I'm using, let me put it on the side here. So these are the colors for the hat that I'm currently using. And I probably should pull a little more red into that top part. So super dark, because like I said, I like to work from dark to light. And pretty much that means I just lay out a base and then I build my lighting on top of that. So with these two colors set, I'm going to go ahead and make another new layer. Let's grab something that's a bit more red. And then the way that I'm going to be placing it down is kind of conscious of where my light source is coming from. So almost everything I always draw has an overhead light that comes from an angle slightly to the side, and I always kind of paint with that light source in mind. And I have to keep in mind that I have to keep that light source consistent throughout the entire piece. So I'm going to go ahead, and you know what, I'm going to make a new layer and just put a little light source arrow as like a constant reminder.
Hey,
what was that?
Would you recommend any programs besides Photoshop, or is Photoshop your go-to?
Actually, in the tutorial I just did this morning, I used Alchemy, and Alchemy is a lot different than Photoshop. It's very simplistic in nature, but it has a horizontal mirror option, and since I was doing something that was very straightforward, I wanted the same on the left and right, so that's a great program. And then also Mischief is a great one for line art, and I'm hoping to try out the Krita build soon. I know this had a big Kickstarter thing, and they just made a Mac demo out, so I'm going to be trying that soon as well.
And where did you snag that original Ziggs image? It's just a splash.
Yeah, it's just a splash art from Google. And this is important because I know fan art is a very tricky subject for a lot of people, where even like tutorials I'm not supposed to do on copyrighted images, but on live streams it's okay because we're not putting it on the site, we're not making ad revenue from YouTube. It's purely just for teaching methods. But if you're out there and you're trying to sell fan art, be very careful. Conventions, I would say it's all right just because it's more or less generally promoting what you're creating. But you got to be very careful about selling it online because you can get in a lot of trouble. And I know some of my friends had to take stuff down because they had fan art online. All right, so I guess this is the big meat and potatoes of the live stream is what I'm doing right here. Is I'm using this red that I'm just picked here, and I'm picking an area kind of in the center, and then I'm pillow shading up and down, because that's where I'm imagining my light source is hitting it, and then it's kind of curving around the surface to create that form. So now while I'm shading it, I'm usually picking up a color around it with my Alt, which is the eyedropper, or the shortcut for the eyedropper tool, and then blending it in. So my process is literally just a rinse, repeat cycle of picking up a color, oftentimes resizing the brush, and then blending it in. So you can see how you start to get that look here. Now around the edges, for buttons, you don't really have to worry about how clean it is because the button part on the edge will be folded underneath of the plastic metal part. So I'm going to be really focusing more towards the inside on detailing that and making that look really awesome. And remember, for something like this, I don't want to shade it on the edges here and here because this surface right here is round. There's no need for a shadow to be there. There might be a little bit of an occlusion shadow, but for the most part, you want to bring this color right up against the edge. And this is what will help give it some hue contrast. And I'll kind of explain that more as we get into detailing the metal part. Now, in the splash art, they have a highlight that is very cool. So even though the rim light and the explosion light is a very warm light, and it's giving it that, I want to say, almost a main light feel as well, you can see in the helmet there's a slight cool reflection, and that's what I'm going to be kind of emulating. So I'm going to be pulling up my color picker. I'm going to grab...
How would you...
Oh, sorry, go.
Yeah. How would you approach if a drawing, like if the light source is coming from behind?
I would start with a very dark backdrop. So even if the figure, I would probably silhouette it out first, and then I would use my rim light color and then kind of edge it out.
And what do you see, like what about drawing is fun for you?
What about drawing is fun for me?
Yeah.
Everything. I find this to be so relaxing, and I guess if I had to pick like what is my favorite stage, it's right now. So like if I laid out all my base and my lines were all set and all I had to do was render something, I could do that for hours and not feel bored or feel like anxious on wanting to get it done. And that's just something that I find to be very relaxing. Where oftentimes that's the thing people hate. And I don't know why I enjoy it so much, but I really love rendering images. Alright, so you can see I'm going to switch back to my basic hard edge brush. I was using the chalk brush just for a little bit, but now I'm going to switch back to my basic hard edge brush. And I'm kind of directing the area right here to be like the main area for my highlight. And I'm making it look a little irregular to give the helmet some little nuances of like bumps, and it looks more battle damaged.
And for someone that stopped drawing for a long time and is trying to pick it up again, like how would you suggest, like what would you suggest to start out? So like getting back into like the groove.
I would start on pen and paper again, pencil and paper. And I would just start sketching things. And if you were doing digital art before and you want to get back into it, don't expect things to look exactly how you might have been, or the skill level you might have been when you stopped. I think sometimes it's not so much like riding a bicycle, where sometimes it takes a few runs and then you'll get back into the groove. But don't expect great results right away, and it takes time and practice. So don't get discouraged, I guess, is my biggest advice. You know what? I'm really not liking this blue highlight. I'm going to go ahead and get rid of it. And this is something that I think is important for you guys to see, is sometimes I'll make a mistake. I don't want to say mistake. I would say a change of mind, where I wasn't really digging how that looked. So rather, I'm going to go with a warm highlight first. So I'm going to choose that red. And let's just make it more intense.
Andrew says, Deandra, you can answer questions to get them out of your way. This way you only see new questions. And I'll answer that because I know I can do that, but unfortunately I don't have the access, as I'm just like a spectator for the stream. Only like the host can do that. So
we were able to figure out one time.
Yeah, we're trying to figure it out, so that way it's not as messy. But for this stream, unfortunately, I'm just gonna have to like sift through all the questions.
Yeah,
But
soon we'll be working remotely in a pretty proximity, so we'll be able to get it working that way. Okay, I better move on, or else I'm gonna be shading this red forever. I really like the color red, so I could like even add some more yellow hues, but I'm gonna go ahead and move on. So let's work on the metal part of the helmet. So the two parts right here. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to start to try to punch them out so it looks like they're closer to the viewer and there's some sort of depth going on. So I'm going to grab that purple on my color picker. I'm going to make it darker and let's lay it pretty heavy on this side considering the light is coming from the other angle. And then on the other one, I'm going to make it lighter, and that's what's going to give the illusion that it has some depth to it.
our next question is, what things do you have a hard time thinking of, or like to make a good picture?
Um,
I guess like
I
what do you
guess
struggle with the most?
I guess environments would be my number one. I've always been, even when I was younger, I always drew people and characters or still lifes or very close ups. So I've never done like vast scenes, including a massive forest or something like that. So I would definitely say that's what I struggle with most.
And Danny asks, do you have any tips on drawing faces? I'm having a hard time making them look good and expressive, and sometimes I have a really cool general pose and it looks good, but then I go back to the face and she struggles.
Um, okay. I would say my biggest advice would probably be to draw from reference. I would pull up images, I would search in Google Faces and try to draw it the best I can. And do it in Photoshop. So try not to do it traditional if you feel like you're wanting to do it more digitally. And my the biggest thing though is not to just bring it into Photoshop and draw right over the image. The biggest thing would definitely be to put it like side by side and try to analyze and observe like, okay, how long is this compared to the nose, or like where in relation are the eyes to the corner of the mouth. And the more little things like that that you kind of observe and pick up and be able to translate into your own work, the better.
Christy asks, I have trouble with perspective and foreshortening. I've done a bit of perspective in my class, but I mostly struggle with foreshortening. How do you get comfortable with it, and how do you go about doing it?
I would say, as with anything, just practice. But for something like that, I would specifically look up either tutorials or something where you might not even realize what you're doing wrong. And I think that's where a lot of artists get frustrated because they're practicing a lot, but oftentimes they're not improving. And in something like this case, if you really feel like it's a struggle, then yeah, I would definitely search out outside of your own personal learning experiences and see if there's any information or learning tools out there that you can kind of take from. Okay, so now I'm going to move on to the middle part of this, the goggles here. And this is pretty simple where I'm just going to lay it out base color, and then since there's a bottom strap, you can see like the underside of the strap. I'm going to just choose a darker version for now and lay it under. Now, if there was bounce light or something coming from the ground, I would probably lay that in now. But since I'm going to go for the basic shadings first, to show you guys what is normally done, and then kind of build up either bounce lighting or rim lights from there. And I just realized his goggles are sort of this nice red color too. So this will be kind of fun to build up. So for the goggles, I'm gonna shade them heavier on the top side, and then they'll kind of do a fall off gradient into the dark, and then build up again, and then into another dark. This will give the impression that they have like almost a metallic surface, a very reflective surface, and that's what I'm trying to recreate here.
When you draw traditionally, what methods do you use to color?
I haven't colored traditionally in a very long time, but I would love to color in Prismacolor pencils, colored pencils. And I did dabble a little bit with acrylics and oil paints, but for the most part, I would say colored pencils were like my go-to.
When doing buttons, do you try to constrain yourself to making it look more flat, or do you shade it like a normal 3D object?
I actually try to shade it in um, being very conscious that it's going to be a button. So I try my best to make it feel like it's popping out, but also I'm not trying to over detail it where a lot of it might get lost because it is a button. It's very small. And sometimes when you over render something that is that small, you lose the impact of what you're trying to create. So I would say I go for an impactful value shading to be kind of what I go for.
What do you think about learning and drawing original art? Like, when do you think you're ready?
Right away. I mean, I think practice can help. Like if you wanted, I feel like we get this question a lot. This almost borders on like the, do you feel like copying someone's style is all right? And I think if you can be inspired from it and like take things and drive it into your own work, that's fine. But I wouldn't copy it and let that kind of stand alone for your own work. Like, I know, DeAndre, you talked really good about this before too.
Um, I don't remember what I said.
It was in the influence chart, and it was something about how, oh man,
Oh, just like not taking your influences like too far.
yeah, yeah,
Um,
yeah, that was it.
kind of just like observing their techniques and then using that like how you want to, you know, just apply
Mhm.
it to like yourself instead of just like directly like stealing, I guess, their style. It would be my recommendation. Are there any games that impacted your drawings more than others?
Oh yeah. I would say most people, especially in school, gave me a little bit of crap for my characters be very Final Fantastical, where they're very feminine in a lot of their proportions or the way they look. But I would say even though that was probably my main inspiration, like Tetsuya Nomura was a huge inspiration for me growing up, I would say now I've gotten more into being influenced by other artists or other means where it's like even Norman Rockwell I love, or even Wes Anderson, the way he crops his images where everything's very center focused and it breaks the whole rule of two-thirds. I would say my influences now have been kind of outside of video games and more or less into things that have kind of grabbed my interest more now that I'm older. I know that sounds really sad, but I don't really play video games as much as I used to, especially when I was younger. I'd say Final Fantasy had a huge impact, Final Fantasy X in specific, and Kingdom Hearts. Those were like the two. I think they hit me when I was like 13. It was like that ripe, crucial age of when you play video games. So those are the two that definitely impacted me.
And then we've got this question quite a bit before, but again, um, Jesse is having a hard time sketching out things like from his head and putting them onto paper. Like basically, just like the transfer is really hard. Like you have an idea, but like how do you put it down?
Hmm. That's a tough question because I can't say you'll. ever get what you have in on your canvas as awesome as it is in your head. I remember in art school, this is one thing that I remembered that they had told us is whatever is in your head will always be the perfect version of what you'll create. So you try to strive to hit whatever's in your head the best to your ability, but just know that more often than not, you won't always be 100% satisfied with the outcome. And you always think, oh, it looked so much better in my head. But if you're really struggling with it, I would say try something else. Do a different concept and come back to it later. Because oftentimes you'll get so flustered by what you're working on and it not turning out for you that it will actually make it worse. Because then you'll be either wasting time or you'll be doing things that aren't very efficient if you're trying to create art. And I would say that would be my biggest advice is to move on and come back to it and even maybe even do studies, do something to get your mind off of it for the time being.
And are studies a waste of time?
No, absolutely not. Oh God, no. I don't know who said that, but please don't think studies are a waste of time. If anything, I think those are more beneficial to your overall longevity of your career than doing like a fan art piece or an original artwork piece. Because oftentimes what you take from those exercises or from those practices, you'll be able to apply it into your own work. I mean, even things like, what was it? The last exercise we had was a candy exercise. But I mean, on the surface, yeah, it's all sweet and whatever, but really it's all about lighting and material and subsurface scattering. And there's so many really important, crucial things in something that may appear just so simple. But if you can learn that knowledge and really be able to apply it to your work, I mean, it'll improve it drastically, in my opinion. And I guess really quick, so now that I'm working on the face, I'm kind of building it up in the center and then I'm shading outwardly. So I'm like pillow shading out until the edges. And that's because one of the lighting situation that we created, but also because since it is a button, I'm trying to generate most of the attention to the center and then kind of have it fade off to the edges.
When learning anatomy, is it better to use just one book as reference or to have like many?
Uh, hmm.
Well, when it comes to anatomy, it's kind of universal. I mean, there's different ways, there's different like styles to approaching it, but for the
I know, and
most,
I feel even bad saying this, but I do not like most anatomy books because I feel like they give a very unrealistic sense of what um, the human anatomy is, where I feel like the very perfect muscular shaped people, and even if they're pictures of people, oftentimes I feel like, well, I don't know, maybe this is just more personal opinion, but if I were you, I would look for anatomy books that are very more catered to realistic people. So like people that aren't bodybuilders. And I think those I learn more from than the ones of like the perfect anatomy models. Even if like the if it's a female that's super little, not very much bust to her, very thin and rigid, but like can be very angular, I think that would be really interesting. Or even like a guy, like one of my art books that I have, it's like this older guy, but he's very much lean muscle, very frail, and you can see like the veins and like the arms, and I think that is so much more inspiring than doing just a perfect anatomy that you could just find on Google. So if you do get an anatomy book, find one that's more obscure, I would say. But that could also just be my own personal taste.
will you do a tutorial on drawing subsurface scattering in translucent materials?
Yeah, I was actually gonna do one on the gummy bear because I had such a positive reaction to the gummy bear that I think it's a really simple concept to grasp once you do it. So I think if I just did a tutorial kind of showing you guys how I did it, yeah, I definitely think that would be in the works.
Do you know anything about pure ref?
Do I know anything about what?
Puref, it's Pureref.
No, I do not. I'm assuming it's a reference site, but you'd have to tell me more about that.
They said it's pretty good having your reference right beside you. I guess we'll check that out later.
Yeah.
Do you ever work with UV map textures at all? And if so, do you have a special shading you do in diffuse maps? I'm curious what shading is still acceptable when the engine covers a lot of it already.
That's really funny. I haven't done a UV map in like 4 years, and I loved doing. It was actually probably my favorite part about 3D was the texturing part. So once I unwrapped it, I would say I would color it pretty similar to this, where I wouldn't do any like intense highlights, or I wouldn't try to, I don't know, make it too flat. So it'd be somewhere in between, where I'm still like making it appear as though it has some value to it and some shape, but I wouldn't try to overdo it where the lighting in the rendering would kind of do that for me. Okay, now I have to be really careful now that I'm doing like fur. I want to make sure, since this is something I don't normally do, I have to concentrate a little harder on making sure I'm doing this right. Where like things like the goggles or anything up here, I almost can let my mind go on autopilot. But for something like fur, I really pay attention to making sure that I'm like clumping it into different groups and then shading it appropriately. Where even with hair, I would say this is my tip for doing like hair and fur, is clump it together so you create like different shapes and then shade it individually that way. Where I don't think drawing individual strands of hair, unless you're doing like the final detail polish pass, I think like doing it at this stage is far too early, and you're just not using your time wisely.
What would you say is the hardest career? Like an animator, architect, guy, or concept artist?
To be honest, speaking from experience, I can't tell you. Since this has been my only job since I've been out of school, I can't really say like one or over the other. I can tell you though from my friends that are in the industry and from what I hear, concept art is a tough job to get into because usually it's very biased toward your talent and who you know. But once you're in, I hear it's a pretty sweet gig. But until you get to that point, it's definitely hard. It's hard finding a job, it's hard maintaining a job, and oftentimes you're doing things that you didn't want to do or didn't see yourself doing. And I think that's a tough pill to swallow. But I think if you're driven enough and you want it badly enough, you can get a job wherever you want. And then it's probably awesome. But I can't tell you so much from an architect point of view. But from what I hear, it's a little tougher than you might think. Just because I have a few of my friends' parents that are architects, and just sometimes, especially when the economy kind of went down in '08, it was definitely tough finding work. So I would say just depending on how the job market is for that field, that kind of is a big influence on whether or not that job is rough.
How do you not over-render? Do you choose a focus part to render more than the other parts?
Yes, and that's definitely something I fail on myself often.
And what do you think is more important, keeping fan art close to the original or giving it your own touch?
I would say both. I would just say depending on the artist. Sometimes like there's some artists out there. I would say Zeronis pops in my head. Art Germ. I think they do a great job of kind of bringing the style into their own. But at the same time, who is that one artist? I can't think of her name right now. But she does a fantastic job of kind of keeping the same style, but then putting it in her own compositions and scenarios. And I can appreciate that just as much as an original look at the character.
And you have a request for possibly a future tutorial. They said, Tim, I've been interested at some point to see you create a small, like 5-foot female character that doesn't have the whole girly pixie look going on, but is kick-ass.
Yeah, absolutely. I would love to do a tutorial like that. In fact, I don't like the types that girls are given right now in our industry, where I think they're very flat and you almost can read the character just from at first glance. Like you can tell exactly what their personality and kind of overused, watered down personality type that they're going to be given. So something like that, where yeah, and if it was a short kick-ass girl, it wouldn't just be like the stereotypical like she had older brothers and she works as a mechanic. Like I definitely think there's some character archetypes like that get overused, and then in my mind they become very flat to me. Like I'm very disinterested in them almost from the get-go. So yeah, I definitely think a tutorial on that would be awesome. All right, so really quick, I'm just going to talk about the goggles. So he has these green lenses to the goggles. So I'm starting with this darker green color. And then I'm also remembering that the red part of the goggles are going to be casting a cast shadow. So I'll make it a lot more apparent, like right around here. And you'll be able to see it more as I get to the end. But I'm going to grab this really intense lime green, and I'm just going to slowly lay it on the bottom half and then kind of gradient it up. Because this green will definitely be a focus point of the entire area. Not only is it one of the few colors that kind of stand out just because it's isolated, but it's surrounded by its complementary color, and it's, I would say, probably going to be the most saturated section of the entire piece as well. So I definitely want to make sure I make this area look pretty awesome, because this is where probably a lot of the focus will be on.
Can I send you my stuff from time to time to get experience criticism and pointers for where I have to improve?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think this is something I should express that in the upcoming fall workshop, I will definitely take a look at any of your work, and every week when we have an exercise or whatever, I'll be able to critique you, give you like an individual critique. And I think having that one-on-one time is very important. 'Cause even while I was in school, I was able to get critiques back from someone that worked at High Voltage. And at the time, it was a huge deal for me. It was like a concept artist that's been working in the industry for more than 10 years. And his feedback was invaluable, where I really was able to take what he was giving me and running with it. And I think that's another important thing that I just want to mention upon is that when you're giving critiques, do your best not to get defensive and try to let the other person talk. I've had too many people where as soon as I start giving critique, they'll get defensive or they won't let me finish. And this is something I've seen throughout, even while I was in art school. And just really just try to take what they're giving you and let it sink in, and don't get offended. Just know that they're trying to help you and help get the piece better. Because if something looks off to them, they're probably not just saying it just to say it. They're probably saying it because they have something that looks off to them. And even though you might disagree with it, at least hear them out and be respectful to let them lay out their opinion.
Speaking of that, would you consider doing a live stream that's like a critique slash paint over from like Clicky members or live stream watchers?
Possibly, because I know this is something I was going to do solely for the workshop, but I think maybe as a test run, yeah, I think like sometime in August I'll do that, and then I'll let you guys know when I'm like sending out a application for stuff to be critiqued.
And do you feel the transition from traditional to digital art is hard, or possibly a curve that can deter some artists?
Yeah, absolutely. There's a lot of artists I know that are my close friends that feel very uncomfortable in digital art, and it may be something specific where it's like they don't like color, or they don't feel comfortable with line art, where I definitely am one of those that do not feel comfortable doing line art in Photoshop. But I think you just have to just tackle it head on. It's one of those things where it's like face your fears, and Photoshop should not be a fear, or whatever digital art software you're using. You almost want to be like best friends with it. Like I love Photoshop. We know each other. We know how I work the brushes in the software, and just get comfortable with it. So if something's you're struggling with and you feel like that's deterring you from like continuing with digital art, either look up tutorials on it, figure out what's going wrong with it, ask questions of people that are in the industry, and try to figure it out. So don't let something scare you away. So now for his teeth, I'm laying out this color right here, but I'm laying it very softly, let some of that background color seep through. And then I'm going to kind of build up the teeth with a second pass, so I'm pushing a little hard on the tablet. And you know what? I'm going to do this on a new layer so you guys can see the difference. But I'm also keeping in mind that that mouth is going to cast just a tiny bit of cast shadow from the nose area.
Would you critique diffuse maps too?
Yeah. You definitely sense that we have some 3D artists in this stream.
Okay, how about this? How would you draw a glass tile in a place where there isn't enough light to make the difference of object behind the glass? It's an interesting question.
Say that one more time.
How would you draw a glass tile in a place where there isn't enough light to make the difference of the object behind the glass? Like it's like it's not really like well lit or something.
I would guess I would try to find reference. Where even sometimes if I'm not exactly sure, like I can give my best guess at it if it was something like I needed done right away. But if it's something oddly specific like that, I would probably try to find reference so I can see and I can analyze it just through observation, and then try to interpret it on how I would recreate that in digital art.
Or even just like make it yourself.
Oh, that's
Like
true.
nothing
Yeah.
wrong with that either. Just like set up the scene, you know, and find out.
Yeah, absolutely.
How much will your workshop cost?
That is something that's still in talks. It's probably going to be around 280, but it's going to be a 5-week, pretty intensive workshop. And I'm going to even be kind of passing on a lot of my concept cookie duties for those 5 weeks so that I can really focus on that workshop and the students that have signed up. So definitely know that you're getting your money's worth. And if there's anything you'd want to see in the workshop, because I know my Wes, who is kind of like the CG Cookie head, we were talking this morning a lot about what I want the workshop to be and what I want people to take away from it. And I really want people to walk away from the workshop feeling so much more confident in their skills as a digital artist. So I don't want to focus so much on like how to draw something specific, where I want it to be like how do I smooth or how do I blend more smoothly, or how do I interpret colors, and how do I know which colors to choose when I'm laying down a green for his eye? Like what would be a good bounce color? I think things like that are so much more important than like how I draw my creatures, because a lot of that is just being taken from my own personal experiences in the past and like giving you guys my own style, where I don't want to be teaching you guys my style. I want you guys to be developing your own style. And I think to do that, you have to build strong fundamentals. So that's what my workshop is going to be about. So if that's something that interests you, I mean, definitely stay tuned. August is going to be the sign up. It's probably going to be early August.
How do you choose, when shading, how do you choose your darker color?
I try to grab a very desaturated, less value color of whatever it is. So if it's red, I try to go for a very, let me just color pick
Like
it.
on the wheel, how would you do it? Or
Oh,
like,
okay. So I know you guys can't see my color picker, but I would steer more towards the bottom left. So the bottom left is like the black corner, where if you go straight up, it's white, and if you go straight right, it's saturation. So I would steer more toward bottom left. Where even if I was doing red, let's see here, I would choose something like this, where it doesn't really have that much to it, but then let's say you start adding some color on top, it really starts to breathe life into the color. And the reason I like to work with desaturated and darker base colors is because then the focus becomes on the more saturated color. And there's that hue contrast as well as a value contrast. Okay,
have
so
you
now that
ever?
we have our first pass kind of done, I'm going to hide that line art layer. You can kind of see how I can still see where everything is, and that's without any line art. So why don't I go ahead and show each layer really quick. So this was my starting layer, my first color pass, second, third with the goggles, fourth was on top of the goggles, the teeth, and then the teeth highlights. So this is like a good base to start on top of. And I think a lot of people try to rush this, but if you take your time getting here, from now on it's just kind of the fun rendering part where you can detail and make things look really crisp. And this is my favorite part of doing concept art in general.
Tim,
Yeah.
your next question is, have you ever challenged yourself by working in different patterns or styles? Like
Yeah.
shading to dark or drawing inverted images?
I definitely have tried. I don't know if many of you guys know. I'm really good friends with Puichi, and he has a very crazy technique and way of going about his paintings, where it's organizing chaos, and it's something that I'm very much opposite of. I would say in the way I go about doing my work, where I try to make it very streamlined, and I kind of have I would say I'm almost too methodical about how I do things. And I learned a lot from doing his technique, and I think it showed me I can loosen up a bit. So even though I still maintain kind of my methodical way of doing it, I took what I learned from doing his style and I try to apply that to my own method. So I think that's the best part about trying new methods is being able to apply it to what you've already kind of established for your own method.
And even as an artist who would want to feel slightly comfortable painting many things, is there something you dread for like a client to ask?
Environments.
Mm.
I wouldn't even say it's like a question. I would say it's very much I do not like doing environments. Oh, and I would say the main reason is just because of how uncomfortable I feel, where sometimes they might expect the same level of quality I try to put into my characters, but they don't understand that I put so much quality into my characters is because this is all I do all day, every day. And I'm very used to the way that they look and little tips and tricks I can add to make them look nicer where I don't have that established mindset when I go into doing environments. And I think you guys will kind of figure that out too the more that you do your own work.
How should you feel about making art?
Amazing. You know what? I take that back. It should be a struggle. It'll be hard at times. It'll be painful where it's you're like you're frustrated to the point where you might get a headache. I would say the best times are where you create something that you're really proud of. You put a lot of work, oftentimes frustration, then you come out with something that you're just really proud of, and I think that's the best part about concept art is that moment when you kind of finish a piece and you can show it to your friends and or maybe it's even for a client and you're really proud and you're like excited for them to see it. But at the same time, you can be on like cloud nine, and then you can have the client absolutely hate it and want you to redo it, even if you're really proud of it. Or maybe your friends, if you're posting on Facebook or DeviantArt, you don't get many likes or many shares or comments. But it's not to take away from that feeling that you initially had. And I think a lot of artists they rely a lot on that positive feedback where you have to be happy about your work for yourself. Don't rely on other people to be happy for you. So you got to want it and be happy for yourself.
Speaking of Pui, do you still stream with him and the other artists regularly?
For the summer, we decided to put it on pause just because Tyler's in North Korea right now, and me and Pui have been con hopping. Like I went to one this past weekend. I have one this upcoming weekend, and then I'll be at Comic Con in 2 weeks. And I'm also house hunting, which is eating a lot of my time. So currently no, but back when fall picks up again, yeah, we will be back on our Monday night streams. But that's not to say I still draw with them often, where we try to get together at least once a week and draw together. And I think that's good for you guys to kind of find too. Find like a good group of friends that you can draw with. Sometimes you just need that support and be able to talk to people that are kind of doing the same thing you are. So I know I've been talking a lot, but like this example up here of what I'm doing this is like the detailing process, and this is for me the most fun. We can go in and kind of detail, and this is where try your best not to zoom in and detail from kind of farther away or like the 100% zoom, and that way you won't be wasting time zooming in and detailing. Where that part should be like the very final step, and that's like you are doing like fine polishing at that point.
Could you maybe have a section about worth ethics in concept art for the workshop, like how you should go about doing the job?
Yes. Yeah, I think that would be, well, the way I'm seeing the workshop is for those who need a place to start or like somewhere where they're like wanting to just purely work on their fundamentals. Where something like that I feel like is more advanced, where it's like I'm about to graduate and I want to know how to get a job in the industry and what tactics should I use. So I think I'll touch upon it in the workshop, but I think that would be in another workshop that I would probably create, where I kind of see myself eventually doing 3 workshops, probably 1 or 2 a year, where it would be the beginning one, intermediate, and then the advanced one. So I think I'm going to start off with the beginner one and then kind of work up from there.
Looking at the Concept Cookie website, I see that the Mother Nature contest really recently ended. When will the next contest begin and how often are they held?
So our contests on Concept Cookie are held every season. So summer, winter, fall, spring. So there actually will be contest. That's funny that you say that because I was thinking of that. I think yesterday I thought of that, where we have to have a summer contest soon, and there's no theme picked out as of now. I was kind of maybe being directed towards doing a pixel art contest, but we'll kind of see where that goes, and just stay tuned. I would say it's going to either be released early August or late July.
And somebody said that the glasses look a little bit flat and that they thought they were more round, like from your reference image.
Oh, like the lens part themselves?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, that's definitely something where it seems like they have more of not like a flat goggle. I don't even know what those type of goggles are called where they're circular or they're spherical. But yeah, you know what? Maybe I'll get to that right now. So let's start with this left eye here. So I'm going to do this on a new layer. Okay, so I'm going to pick this green. I'm going to make it a little darker so I can outline it. So right now we're trying to give the illusion that there's a spherical piece of lens glass inside of here, inside this goggle. So I'm going to be recreating that by imagining the sphere in here and trying to kind of recreate that the best I can. Kendra, is there someone knocking on your door?
No. It's, well, if you want me to explain, there's some workers on our roof right now.
Oh, okay.
And they just decided to start doing stuff again.
Right,
So sorry about that.
So you can see in the reference, which is really hard to see, there's like a sliver of light Get the capture right on the edge of where the goggles meet the sphere. This is something that I'm going to try to add. And a lot of recreating this definitely depends on the lenses themselves. So the way that you're trapping the spherical glass inside of there. So I'm definitely trying to make it look as if it's bubbling out of the goggles just ever so slightly. So to do that, I have to give the illusion, and sometimes I'm trying to think of this sphere and shading it like a sphere. Right now, I feel like it's looking very Cheshire Cat. So the biggest way that I'm going to be able to do this is once I kind of lay out all my base is the way that I place my highlights. And that's what will give the impression of that spherical lens.
For the workshop, is it on flexible time? Because I'm in school from 8 to 2:30 U.S. Western Time.
Oh yeah, absolutely. It's one of those things where I'll be giving like weekly assignments, and then you can complete them on your own time. And then there will be probably 2 meetups a week, where one will be a live stream, and the other will be more of a critique on artist work. So if you can make those 2 streams, then besides that, yeah, then it's kind of on your own time of when you want to get things done. Okay, so now I'm going to lay in my highlights here. So if I wanted to look flat, I would probably do a circle like this. But since I want it to appear as if this is a spherical item, I'm going to place it as if it was a sphere. So you almost can think of it as like you're placing a sticker, a perfectly circle sticker on the spherical lens and how that would look from this angle. Something like that. And that starts to give the impression and illusion that it's a spherical shape. And probably some of that bounce or this light, if it was kind of passing through the lens, it would be pooling into the other. But rather than using the cool light, I'm going to put in some nice highlights down here. So now in the reference image, there's something that I also really love is that, oops, hold on, someone's calling my phone. There we go. So it almost looks as though the light is illuminating from the goggles themselves. So I'm going to recreate that as well. So to do that, I got to paint the inside of this lens, but I don't want to paint it as strong as the color inside of the lens because that will kind of throw off the whole illusion. So I'm just going to give a soft paint on the inside here. Then maybe make it a little more intense at the bottom. Something like that.
Do you recommend working on just a few layers, or is more better?
That comes down to personal preference. I think for me, I find myself working on fewer layers now that I kind of have my method where I'll usually merge all the layers into one, and I treat it very much like a painting. Where if that's something that works for you, I mean, awesome. But if you really like having the individual layers, I'll definitely do it that way. But as saying that, though, I also want to make notice that if you're working for a client or something where you might need to have different variations or interpretations of the same concept, you definitely want different layers where you would be able to take it on and off very easily on what you added. So now here on the goggles, I'm using this orange right here, and I'm using it to kind of punch out the color a bit more. And this is where you get into things of like it just goes on autopilot, where I know this method works. I've done this before, where I know adding this color on top of this sort of dark blood red, almost like a crimson, will create this nice result. So usually the best way you can learn like what works and what doesn't is purely just through experience.
Your next question is, I'm a big believer in mentorship. Technology has made industry veterans, hold on, lost it. More accessible than ever. How would you recommend? Sorry, I lost the thing.
It's okay, find it.
This
No
would be
rush.
much easier if I could answer
Answer
the
them.
questions officially, yes.
Hmm.
Alright. Technology has made industry veterans more accessible than ever, but getting to the point where they would be willing to be a mentor is not easy. Any suggestions on how to make a wise transition from stranger to mentee?
You know what's funny is oftentimes just sending an email and asking if they can. Where a lot of times you might just be responded with a nice like decline of like I just don't have time for that. I'm really sorry. I hope you or I wish you the best. But I would say when I emailed people when I was in school, most of the feedback I got was very positive, and there were emails I got back that were just like, "I'm sorry, I just don't have the time." But like people like Andrew Johnson, the guy that worked at High Voltage, not only did he take the time to critique my work, but he did a paint over and then sent it back. So sometimes you'll surprise yourself with how willing they are to give you feedback. I think it just a lot of time just depends on what they are currently working on and if they have the time to even help you out. So I would say just send an email, be really nice about it, and just ask. The only way, the worst that they can say is no. I guess that's the biggest thing there.
What would you stress most about not doing with art? Or like what are the biggest mistakes, I guess?
Hmm, that's a really good loaded question. What would I suggest not doing the most? I would say relying on feedback to fuel your drive. I know that's kind of a vague answer, but I find that a lot of people get very disheartened or very disappointed if other people don't like what they create. And I think that that prevents you from really growing as an artist because then you're so stuck on trying to impress other people rather than just trying to be true to what you like. So I guess that would be my biggest one. So now really quick, here on the goggles, I added this sort of bounce light and it's this neutral gray and pretty much the sole purpose of this isn't just from like trying to recreate accurate lighting right here. It's really to punch out the goggles and give it that illusion of depth and that it has the shaping to it.
Will there ever be a traditional series or a workshop or a back to basics set of tutorials on concept cooking?
I think eventually yes, but I don't think that there would be any in the near future. I think we have one coming out in the fall from an artist that we recently got in contact with, but as of now, there are no plans for it. But I do like the idea of doing a traditional tutorial because I think it's important for just any artist to recognize if they want to get into digital art, having a very strong traditional background helps like substantially. And it will translate eventually. Once you get comfortable with the software in Photoshop, it will translate, and I do promise that.
Do you feel that listening to different music or no music alters the art you're creating while you're listening?
Yes, absolutely. And even oftentimes, if I'm drawing a specific character or one of from my own graphic novel, I feel like I play music that relates to them in some way. And this may even sound pretty dorky, but I really believe that it helps. Where if I'm drawing a very energetic, lively character, I'll play music that kind of matches that. or if I'm kind of creating a very depressed, saddened, almost emo character, I'll definitely play music that's much more melancholy than a character that's very energetic and upbeat. So now in this mouth area right here, I think this is a good staple for any concept artist to understand, is that when you lay two bordering contrast colors, let me see if I can, right here, that's what will give the illusion of depth. And you can stress that by, let's add even a lighter color. You don't want to overdo it. Like, I think this is where you can get into over rendering things, and I know I definitely fall on that all the time. But you can see how much more that punches it out from before. So before, after, before, after. But it will definitely give the illusion of depth if you're trying to create that.
Would you do a paint over in the next live stream?
Maybe. I think that's something I want to think about, because if I do it, I want to make sure I'm doing it right, and I really feel confident in the way that I will go about doing it. So I would say, let me get back to you guys on that one. I know a lot. This isn't the first time that I've been asked to do a live paint over. So let me get back to you. I know I have a live stream or a convention this weekend, so my time will be kind of limited, but I will definitely think about it and then get back to you. Eventually there will be one, I promise, and it will be before the workshops start as kind of my test run.
Do you have any tips for drawing scary things?
Whew, man, we got some good questions today. I secretly love drawing horror, and I think it's because of the way that you render it. It has to appeal to a certain sense, and I like the idea that you have to use horror elements to create the illusion of horror, I guess, in general. So the way that you render blood, or the placement of the eyes, or the way you color the eyes, or like everything adds up to trying to create this horror element, and figuring out what that is, or what does work and what doesn't, I think is very interesting. Where oftentimes even like a lot of my favorite concept art books have a lot of the things that I gravitate towards are the horror stuff. So even like in the Alice Madness Returns, I really love this dead bloody fish, and the way that it was rendered and colored was so gorgeous. I think a lot of the times I oftentimes overlook the actual concept and look at the way that it was rendered. And oftentimes horror can be rendered so beautifully because of all the mixings of colors and the way that often blood kind of complements the other colors. I know that sounds really disturbing, but red is my favorite color, and I really like the way that most concepts of horror kind of integrate red into their pieces. So that might just be a personal bias, I would say. Okay, and I know that we've gone over our time limit. I just want to get a little further, at least finish the nose and the teeth, and then pretty much I would just take everything that I just did and then flip it to the other side. So with the nose here, I'm trying to really punch it out with a yellow, just because I'm trying to have that warmth of the lighting mixed in with the pink that's his nose color. Give it some highlighting. Okay, then let's work on giving the fur around the face. So just like we did kind of near the outside, just clumping it into different shapes.
We have a good question. How was your journey to become a professional artist?
How what?
How was your journey in becoming, like, what was your journey in becoming a professional artist or getting paid for art?
I would say I had a very fortunate career path where, well, I guess I should go back to when I was in school because that's when it really did start. Because then I was working for two iOS games that were made, and I was like the lead concept artist. I did everything, and I had to teach myself Photoshop, and I wasn't paid. I was promised to get royalties based on how much the game made, and I was one of those many artists that you hear about where they weren't paid. They did a ton of work, and then the game ended up not doing well, and I ended up what I think a lot of people would consider wasting time, but in my opinion, I learned more in that period than I did all throughout school, just because I had to teach myself like how to animate in Photoshop, and that was a really interesting um, kind of learning period where it was a lot of struggles, a lot of frustrations, but I think that really taught me that you really have to teach yourself. You can't rely on either a school or an education to give you what you need. You really have to get it for yourself. And I think I don't want to drift too far off the question. So I guess then from there, I had my portfolio show, and Wes and Jonathan were there, and they're the owners of CG Cookie, and they brought me on as a 3D concept artist, or not a 3D concept artist. I was doing concept arts that was specifically for Jonathan to model in 3D. And I think that's initially what they thought they were going to bring me on to do. And then I was going to be eventually doing tutorials in Blender because that was my background and what I went to school in. But I ended up doing Photoshop as kind of a test run. They gave me like a, like, oh, we'll see what he does kind of a thing. And they really liked it to the point where eventually, after 4 months of kind of working as an intern, they gave me Concept Cookie. And they're like, this is your baby. It's up to you to kind of take care of it and raise it. So I took that and I ran with it. I wanted it to succeed so badly. I was very dedicated to it, and it kind of just grew from there. And now 4 years later, here I am, still with CG Cookie. I love my job. I'm able to work remotely, and I don't regret not ever working in the industry because I kind of found what I love, and I didn't even know it. So I would say your path is kind of undetermined, and you might surprise yourself with what you will enjoy doing more than other things. Where even I had thought I was going to be a children's book illustrator for a while, and um, going into school, I was so set that I was going to work on the next Final Fantasy, and that was like my goal. But then as school went on and I became older, I started realistically looking at the job market and what I would be offered. And I think it can be very discouraging, but stick with it, keep your head up, and keep practicing. Just know that talent is always in demand, no matter what the market is. So if you can just stick with it and keep improving your skills as an artist, you won't have to worry. So yeah, sorry, that was a very long answer to your question. So now
When,
for the gums themselves, I'm gonna place kind of this purple color, and I probably would have made it more red, but I'm gonna go ahead and then choose more of a pink and just subtly hint at the gums. Oh, sorry. Now what was the question?
sorry.
That was okay.
um, when working on the iOS games, is that when you worked with texture maps last?
No. Uh, Texture maps up until I graduated, because I was repeatedly told that I was going to be a 3D game artist, and I was very adamant that I did not want to do 3D after I graduated. But they made me include at least a couple 3D models that I created. So I did these two female characters, and that was the last time I did a texture map. But I still love doing texture maps. Like, don't get me wrong, that was my favorite part about 3D. And if I really did get a job in 3D, I don't think it would have been completely disappointing because I would have still done digital art in my own time just because of how much I like doing this. But sometimes you'll surprise yourself even as you go along on what you'll end up doing.
How would you train your visual library in the best way?
This is something I just talked about in the tutorial. That's why this is so ironic that it's being asked. I would look outside of what is normal. So don't look at art books, don't look at movies or games that are current. I mean, obviously, I still think you should, and they obviously can give you a good inspiration sense. But I would say if you're trying to be more original, look at things that are outside of our entertainment field. So look at things like the tutorial that I did was about a plant that I found on clearance at a market, and how I found that inspiring enough to be a whole creature concept. So I think you should find your inspiration in places other than what is like the surface level go to. And look at, I think the greatest character concept artists also have a really great sense of fashion. And it's not because they like, they're into that whole stereotype of what a fashion designer is, but they see things very uniquely and they work really adamantly on being original or try to create something new. And I think having that passion for creating something original is very inspiring. So then when you see a work of someone's from the fashion industry and you get to see like what is their best take on being original or what's their best presentation, and I think that can be very inspiring. Where you'll see like the very top concept artists, they have a very adamant inspiration from fashion, especially the ones I really look up to, like Tetsuya Nomura has a huge inspiration from French fashion designers. And I think the more that you integrate yourself with fashion, if you want to be a character artist, is the better.
Are you using the color mixer or just low opacity?
Low opacity. Okay, so
And
I think there you go.
besides the candy challenge, could there be other food painting or even modeling challenges or tutorials later on?
There probably won't be modeling challenges because Concept Cookie is very specific toward 2D education. So maybe on Blender Cookie there might be. But I would definitely say, yeah, there could definitely be a food exercise where I think doing something like a tangerine slice and showing the subsurface scattering that way. I mean, it would be kind of reminiscent of the gummy bear, but that would be showing more of like the inside, the veins of the tangerine or a clementine or an orange or anything where you can really give that appearance. And there are other foods that I think would be really great as well. So like I think a strawberry would be a very difficult challenge where to really get the seeds and make them look like they're pushed into the actual strawberry, that would be a challenge. So I think yeah, anything that you want to draw can be a challenge. It's just depending on how you look at it, how you light it, and then how you execute recreating it on canvas. So don't just rely on, the concept cookie exercises. Make your own exercises. Really try to create something that maybe you're interested in and go from there. Okay, I would say I'm gonna cut the stream off in like 5 minutes. So if you have any other questions, I mean, feel free to ask them now. Probably be the best time to ask them. And then we will do our best to get to all the questions before the stream cuts off.
Do you have any plans to make tutorials based on designing kid characters or anthropomorphic characters?
Not currently. And I think just because I wouldn't feel comfortable with that type of subject matter, just because I haven't done it enough. Where if it was something like earlier where someone was suggesting doing a short, tough chick and trying to be more of an original character, that I would feel very comfortable with because I feel like that's right down my alley of what I'm interested in, what I'm good at executing, and that would be more of a tutorial that I would readily create. Where if I was doing something more anamorphic or anthropomorphic, is that how you say it correctly?
Anthropomorphic.
Yeah, I think that one I would have to practice a little bit more before I felt comfortable doing a tutorial on it.
And how do you go about learning a new style?
How to go about learning a new style?
It's kind of a big generic question.
Yeah, I would say it's going to be frustrating and you're going to be constantly having this inner battle of do I do this style or do I do this one? I know for me personally, it was always like, do I go for more of hyper realism or do I do more fantastical? And I think that's even something Deandra right now, would you say you're going through of like trying to figure out what style I
Yeah,
want to kind
definitely.
of claim as my own, if you want to call it that?
I think the trick is to just stop worrying about what style you're gonna have and
Hmm.
just keep learning. And like that's the most important part. And eventually you'll find out what you like, what you don't like, and it'll all come together, I think.
Yeah, I think that's the scariest people for, or things for people to realize. It's like you got to trust yourself, and eventually it'll come. Now, really
When
quick, if the lighting is coming from this direction, this metal strap thing right here would probably be casting just an ever so slight cast shadow. So I'm just gonna really lightly lay one on right there. You can see what that looks like. And then the highlight will come up right against that cast shadow. Something like that. Okay, what was that? Sorry.
sorry, I keep interrupting. When's the next stream?
Next Wednesday at 2 o'clock. We do these every Wednesday at 2 p.m. Central Time, and that's -6 GMT.
And do you think there'll be a contest or tutorial anytime soon on drawing different eras or genres like steampunk, medieval, sci-fi, etc.?
Yeah, that's originally what my workshop was going to be about. It was going to be about the four genres, or at least in my opinion, what are the four genres, which are cute, horror, fantasy, and sci-fi. And I think everything can be kind of filtered into those four categories. So that will probably be my next workshop after this kind of getting started one. So that one I will talk about, yeah, different genres, and then like even steampunk I would kind of throw into fantasy, where I really feel like those are the four that you can kind of fit any subject matter into, and then talk about like the differences between them, target what you're working on to focus. So like if you're working on a client that is doing like a new Pokemon game, you definitely have to have a cute sense of mind in mind. And if you originally or are most comfortable doing like horror stuff, you definitely have to switch your templates a little bit, but then use what you're comfortable with and make it work in the cute design era. And you might be thinking, well, that's impossible. Those two are opposites on their subject matters, but you can integrate like the way you color. Like I said earlier, I think horror has a really interesting way of integrating red into places where you'd be able to integrate red interesting into your cute subject matter. Now it might not be like a bloody corpse, but it might be this cool little dragon design in the way that you draw red or incorporate red into the character itself might be really interesting. So don't subject yourself to just one subject matter. Where yeah, you can definitely have like a favorite or one that you are more drawn to, but definitely feel confident being like, if my client gave me a cute subject matter or sci-fi or fantasy and I almost always do horror, I know that I can, bend my skills to fit and alter what mold they need me to do. Okay, I'm gonna finish with the teeth and then I think I'm gonna call the stream done.
How about I lost it again. Okay, somebody asked, in the future, would you try sometime to get a viewer artist to come and be in the hangout with you? Like you both draw, and then you would give advice and such. So instead, how we would see how to make it right. Not how to make it right, but how to fix your mistakes by using the guest artist. So
Yeah.
basically, somebody is like applying everything that you're teaching, like as you're teaching it.
Oh, that's interesting. It's like a live teaching session.
Yeah, I guess so.
You know what? I never really thought of that. That's definitely an interesting thing I could do. Because eventually, I think I would want Deandra to start joining these as well, where we're both drawing and kind of talking. It might be harder to look through the questions, but I'm sure we'll figure out something. Or even, I would love if Puichi came on one of these live streams.
Yeah.
So I think if we were given the same subject matter, and then you can kind of see how we would both approach uh, the execution of it, and you kind of see how, yeah, Tim and Pui have really different styles, and the way that they go about it is very different, but they both create something that is uniquely their own. And this, I think that's really important for people to see is that it takes years for you to develop a personal style. And even me, I would say mine is just starting to come into its own. And I think it's important for you guys to see how Pui and I work at different paces, different methods to create the same subject matter.
I think that would be interesting, and just like to have like the newbie or something. Also, we talked about a little bit with Dan, remember, of just like being able to see like what, like they'll be the one that's like making mistakes, and then you could like go ahead and like talk about, like what they're going through as they're going through it or
I
something.
wonder, do I even draw then, or do I just kind of watch them draw?
I think you could still like teach as you go. I don't know, it'd have to be like a trial thing because I'm not quite sure, but
Yeah, which
there's
would be
potential
fine.
there.
Yeah, I would like testing that out.
Let me look through the questions one more time.
Yeah, okay, do one more pass through, and then we'll call the stream done. And really quickly, I can show you guys what I was working on this morning. Let me copy and paste it in here. So here's my creature design I did. And this is where I was talking about it being perfectly symmetrical from left to right down the center. And Alchemy is a great software. You can create something like that really quick. So I don't even know if, oh, you guys can't see when I open Alchemy. But the initial sketch looked like this. And, well, there wasn't erase marks, but that's what it originally looked like. And then it turned out like this, eventually after just painting over and blending and all that good stuff. So are we done with the questions?
We had one more, but it keeps moving around.
Oh, try to capture it.
How would you go about making a group of characters have unique outfits, but they're still able to look like a unit? Would it be more focused on their colors, design, or a bit of both?
Both, definitely. The way that you portray them, the way that they're drawn is huge. And even, in a sense, their proportions in the way that you draw their anatomy. Like, I can almost always tell a Final Fantasy character almost purely on their silhouette. And I think that's something that is very strong. So if you start off with very strong silhouettes that are recognizable, I think that's a great place to start from and then work from there.
And what size is your canvas? I think is the last one.
This is 7 inches, or no, 8 inches wide, but let me check it's just over 2,000 pixels each, and normally I wouldn't work this big on a button, or mind you, I probably wouldn't even take this on a button, but I really wanted to enlarge it so you guys can see every step of the way, and I wanted to work slower to show you guys how I would detail things step by step. Where normally something like this, I would probably work. Let me see what the real resolution of this is. It'd probably be about this big. And I may zoom in a little bit, but for the most part, I would stay rather zoomed out while I worked on it. Well, this is a good example of if this was something I was working on in my own time, I would definitely not zoom in this close or keep it this close. Because if I'm working on a button, the button itself is only 1.5 inches large, so I want to be kind of staying back and not over detailing, where a lot of those details will be lost when I'm looking at the button itself just because of the actual size of the button. Alright, so that was our last question, right?
Yep.
Okay, well then, yeah, this live stream went a little longer, but I want to thank you guys for coming and sticking with it. We do these live streams every single Wednesday at 2 p.m., and that's Central Time in the States. And outside of the States, it's -5 GMT. We'll be here next week. Stay tuned for a tutorial that comes out tomorrow, along with my plant tutorial, which will probably come out Friday. And stay tuned for more updates on the workshop. So thanks again, guys, for coming to the live stream. Bye-bye.
Goodbye.